Hello everyone, and welcome to this exclusive LinkedIn Live, part of the AI Horizon 2030 journey that all my
Oh my.
guests and I have been going through for the past few weeks. And we cannot wait to meet a lot of you at ITC Vegas 2025 in just a few weeks. We are here with an extraordinary lineup of insurance executive and tech founders to tackle a big question. What will an autonomous age of insurance really look like now and in the future? So I'm really thrilled to have with us Franklin Manchester from SAS, Denise Garth from Majesco, Yanni Placencia from Data Event Software, Sri Saramaswamy from Charlie AI, and Will Ross from Federato. Thank you very much for joining me today and actually diving into, I think, one of the most important questions of, I think, the next 10 years. By 2030, I think much earlier than 10 years, actually, the question is, will the most valuable companies be those that own the customer, control the data, or master AI algorithm at scale? Today, I mean, we've seen so many stats during the past 2 months, but one I capture is 77% of insurers use artificial intelligence in claims and underwriting, but only 73% of insurtechs really pilot do not reach at all production level. So we are saying in that pilot, I call it pilot purgatory, right? And never actually move to production level. So why is that? And I hope you will not mind helping us answer some of those questions. So I would like to explore with you who wins, who loses, and what new risk and opportunities emerge as a result when every risk can be tracked in real time. So let's get started with some question, and really everybody online, make sure to ask question in the comment. We will look at those questions and respond to them. Make sure to look at those, and we look forward to engaging with you. So let's dive into what I call Act One, the 2030 vision of who wins, who loses, and why. Franklin, let's dive into this first scenario. By 2030, do you think that the most valuable insurance companies will be those who own the customer, control the data, or build the best artificial intelligence algorithm? What are your views on this point, and where would you put your money if you had to make some choices of building an AI ecosystem?
Thanks, Sabine. Happy to be part of this panel and looking forward to seeing you all at ITC in a few weeks. So for me, companies who own the customer are going to win hands down, and I believe the choice there very simply belongs to the customer with whom they do business in most cases, right? That said, data and AI do play a role. Companies own customer loyalty. They earn it over years because they demonstrate trust. So the use of that data, the proof of that their AI is adding value is how that trust is, made or broken. And the difference, I think, for me is, I can buy data, I can borrow data, I can steal data, and I can use non-AI solutions or even pretty good AI and still win the day. But if I don't have that customer convinced, then my value proposition is going to be unconvincing. And the proof point I would use is you can just look at merger and acquisition activity that's going on today. In 2025, we did see merger volume, M&A volume decline somewhat in frequency. It's about 10% roughly, depending on the metric you're looking at. But the size, the value of those deals has increased. You look at AJ Gallagher's $13.5 billion cash acquisition of AssuredPartners, which is one of the largest in history. Munich Re and Ergo purchasing Next for about $2.5 billion. My alma mater, Nationwide, buying Allstate stop loss business for $1.25 billion. These aren't small deals, right? This is a clear indication being placed of focus on who owns the customer. So for me, for my dollar, if I were wagering, it's going to be the firms who win are the ones that are owning the customer.
And it's fair. Those who are going to win are those who are winning. We are going to own the customer. And I love the M&A you mentioned, because as you said, they are not small, they are sizable. And they actually also enable some of those players to enter new markets, right? At the click of a button. And so the competition, therefore, is going to shift. And some of the incumbent will need to think about the problem slightly differently. Dennis, as artificial intelligence, right, robotics and sensors become completely ubiquitous, what is for you the most radical change you expect in our industry across the insurance value chain, right, by 2030? And who do you think stand to lose by, doing very little?
So to kind of frame this, I thought I would share a quote that I found from John Chambers, who was the founder and CEO, chairman of Cisco Systems back in the day. And he did an interview with McKinsey. And this quote I thought was really profound. There's not been a technology since the internet with this broad of a scope and implementation. In many ways, the implementation of AI is like that of the internet, but it's going to move at 5 times the speed with 3 times the outcome. Well-run companies will improve their productivity every year during this decade by 7 to 10%. This has huge implications for profitability and differentiation in the market. I think if you even believe a portion of that, if it's not 7 to 10, if it's 2 to 3, the impact, I think, of AI is going to have radical changes. And I think it's twofold. One is that it really, truly has the opportunity to change the operational model and completely reinvent how we do business through not just adding on AI. I think it's really leveraging AI and embedding it into the entire end-to-end value chain and business process. It can improve quality, it can improve consistency, and it can improve the speed of work. And it's going to achieve, I think, levels of cost efficiency and productivity that we haven't seen in decades, from probably the first times technology was applied in this industry. And the most important thing is it's going to drive down expense ratios. And why is that important? I think it's important because it's going to positively improve productivity and profitability. It's going to help improve pricing and competitiveness and growth in the market. And improving that product pricing is so critically important because we're at a point in our industry where customers are finding ways that they can try to afford insurance because rates have gone up so high, because risk has increased, costs have increased from a claims perspective and just operational aspects. So we've got to find a way to make product pricing affordable so that we don't have gaps of risk out there in the market. I think the other aspect is that we've been talking about this for a few years. We are facing in the insurance industry up to 40% of the insurance workforce retiring. And, this younger generation will not come in and work with the green screens. How are you going to be able to attract and retain the best talent? And more importantly, how can you actually work in an environment that allows people not only increasing productivity and you get more volume input and all of that, but allow people to use their brains, to use their knowledge, to use their expertise by doing more analysis. If we can spend more time on underwriting, if we can spend more time on servicing, if we can spend more time on claims and have the information and the access to the information in a way that we can improve the outcomes, the business outcomes, but also the customer experience, I think we become a very customer-centric, to build off of what Franklin said, very customer-centric and very future-ready organization over a period of time. And I think that we today talk about AI. This is something that our chief product officer has talked about. AI is something that we've added into software. We've got a new capability that we partner in with. In the future, he believes that AI is going to be the software, and that AI agents can take over functions and user interfaces to build human navigation. That it's not going to be about traditional databases and hard-coded rules. It's about empowering your existing staff with these AI agents that can actually empower them to do their jobs better and provide the experience to customers that they really expect today and in the future.
Yeah. Last week I had a series of calls, and one was with a gentleman in Canada. And the question I wanted to get him to help me answer was, are we still going to use the internet tomorrow in 5 years' time? Or are we all going to start using those ChatGPT platform as a means to search for information, even to look for insurance products? And he said to me, Sabine, it's not going to be 5 years. Just watch this space within the next 2 years. So we are going through a massive transformation. You mentioned workforce transformation, aging expert, let's call them, mature experts with all the knowledge codifying their brains, leaving the industry. And we need to find a way to codify that knowledge in leveraging, I guess, the technology to help the younger people learn faster, but do it like the best, real best within our teams. But at the same time, the way we are going to do things is going to change completely. You talk about the AI system that requires for us to rethink completely process and value chain. The things we have been used to doing is not going to be done the same way in the future. Yep. And I've heard some numbers of people implementing AI having very, very bad results because poor processes with AI is actually horrendously bad. And so, unfortunately, those expense ratio and core are not actually doing as well as we were expected. So 3, coming to you. So if you were able to imagine a world where every risk is tracked in real time, what new risks and opportunities for you emerge for the insurers, brokers who are there? And how do you see the definition of insurance maybe evolving and changing itself?
Real-time risk tracking is super exciting for us, especially because we are in the business of collecting all these risks from all the learnings that we have gone through at Charlie. It really converts it from insurance being a protection after the fact to going to prevention before that happens, before a risk really becomes a loss. The new risks that we are seeing is more attached to AI, and this is coming from an AI company myself, and we are seeing things like data ownership, liability when you use some of these AI solutions, because who's making the decision, who's owning the data, and what is the algorithmic bias in all these things, and how do we deal with these things? Definitely the huge opportunity is the proactive risk management and the tailored products that come with it. I also believe very strongly in insurance shifting from being just a mere indemnification contract to predict, protect, and profit.
Predict, protect, and profit. And we must remember that we must run very valuable and profitable business as we do and go through our transformation. So, Will, let's go deeper, right, into technology, underwriting as well. So, if you could bet on one technology, I asked Dennis about AI, robots, sensors, everything else, right? What do you think is going to have the biggest impact on us, on the insurance industry by 2030? What are your bets and why?
I would be remiss not to say AI. However, I think the best way to answer this question is to go a level deeper than that and really talk about what do we know about our industry that requires us to think about this at another level. We know that we are ultimately working with largely regulated products. Even where we're not working with regulated products, we are working with products where certain aspects of the process, whether that's creating legal documents in the forms of quotes or policies, or generating pricing through various rating technologies, is really more deterministic than probabilistic. And so what is most interesting to me is really the intersection of deterministic systems, right? Systems that can create a quote or create a policy or create a rate with probabilistic technologies that can interpret an email, interpret a command from an underwriter at the point of choice. Going to Franklin's point, interpret a command from a broker or even the insured themselves, right? To your point of going all the way out to the chat interface. And so as I think about that, there's a very, very interesting trend around what's called Model Context Protocol, or MCP. And this is really what allows AI reasoning systems to take natural language information, very unstructured information, and determine or interact with very deterministic systems fluently. And so, we believe, and I believe, that this is going to be as critical as what we would call TCP/IP or the kind of transfer protocols that govern the internet were to the ways AI systems will work in the future. And so it's not just AI, it's not just robotics, it's all about what are the underlying technologies that are going to make AI work in the insurance context. And to me, that points really, really crisply to how are you going to take all the context, all the tools, all the deterministic tools of the insurance ecosystem and make them play nice with these things.
Do you think that verticalization is going to be important for us, Will?
I do. I think verticalization is going to increasingly matter, right? We can talk about verticalization a few different ways. I mean, again, back to Franklin's point here, going all the way out to embedded insurance, right? And this idea of the insured is purchasing a product, and are they buying some sort of insurance product right then at the point of sale, such that a car salesman becomes an insurance agent in that moment. I believe that the more we're able to take kind of natural language input, right, and natural language reasoning, the more we're going to be able to automate the long tail of insurance underwriting processes. And that, we're really seeing customers push the bounds of what can be automated right now. It's no longer just about straight through processing bots. Right? We're seeing folks automate, 50x 200 tier 1 wind risk in the E&S environment. That is wild to think back on what a lot of the ecosystem was talking about just 2 years ago, and to see where people are pushing the boundaries today. And so as more and more risk can be underwritten in that way, I think inevitably the insured wants to take more control, the agent wants to take more control on behalf of the insured, and all of that lends itself to verticalization, embedded, and it'll happen at different layers of the stack, and there'll be different degrees of verticalization everywhere. But I do believe anytime you create those layers of automation, you're trending towards more vertically integrated distribution flows being attractive.
Yeah, fascinating. So Yandy, let's talk about one key stakeholder, right, who has to manage the finances of the organization, the CFO. If you empower that CFO with real-time data, how that office of the CFO is going to be impacted, right? When we start looking at all this technology and artificial intelligence within the mix, right? While enabling at the same time dynamic risk assessment and ensuring that all the data is actually in the right place. What is your prediction for that CFO office? Do you see them managing the data? Do you see them becoming, the company platforms and orchestrators? Do you see them requiring the use of agents? What is your view of how an office like the Office of the CFO managing the transformation coming to us right now?
Thank you for having me. The office of the CFO has been heavily underserved for many years. There's a lot of tools that have been coming throughout every other different stakeholder and participant in the value chain. But for the most part, CFOs have been dealing with Excel, Microsoft Access, and continuously just legacy tech. And they haven't really been given the capabilities of real-time data, or even to really know what's taking place in real time, or close to real time, or even as close to a day. That doesn't really exist for the most part in many carriers. The office of the CFO also is, they're constantly really they're a couple layers behind in terms of the information flow, because by the time it ends up in the financials, there's like 6 different layers of transformations that data has to go through before it gets to the lens of the CFO. And not only that's a challenge for financial reporting and really knowing how the business is doing, how the business is performing in real time, but also it adds bottlenecks to be able to move on to really how is my combined ratio performing. That takes like 2 to 3 weeks just to get a good glimpse of what's going on, and it's only on a monthly basis. Expense ratio, yeah, it's critically important, and for the most part, you could have a pretty good idea of where it's going, but you won't know actuals for, again, a couple of weeks, because it always has to wait for the reconciliation process to go through, because all of these silo systems and the downstream systems are not connected. So you have from a really high level the general ledger, which ends up giving you the financial picture of the business, but then what's actually taking place, and that's all in the downstream system, all the way down to the core systems, and there's no real connection between all of them. This is heavily dependent on data teams who do all the heavy lifting of the data from down from the core system up onto the general ledger, and it's the CFO is it's a persona that is currently having to answer a lot of questions. The role is continuously growing to really into more of a data position, because a lot of data governance and data strategies are tightly aligned with the CFO. Because at the end of the day, all the data that is in all of these downstream systems, it all has to do with transactions. It all has to do with profitability and how we're actually doing as an organization. So it really it's tightly aligned with the lens of the CFO at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. So you talked about those downstream systems and all those connection, and looking at the persona. I wanted to dive into the CFO persona. Those guys are struggling to actually work with a data first enterprise. So let's move into scaling with artificial intelligence and being a data first organization, to actually see those pilots move to enterprise level and actually creating impact within the enterprise. So Franklin, you're used to doing this, right? I know. So for you, when you look at what is happening right now, to actually deliver AI enterprise level at scale, what is the biggest barriers to move from experimentation to production level, or to scalability level type insurance system? When we look at the level of legacy tech we have, Denise mentioned the talent gap, or anything else you see out there, how do we start overcoming all of this, Franklin?
Yeah, great question. And so for me, technology adoption is inherently a people problem. So when you ask the question, what's the biggest barrier to scaling your technology? It's your talent gap. Well, so how do we overcome that? Well, first you have to admit you have a problem, right? Before you can overcome it. And we are monitoring the chat. The question that Meredith Barnes-Cook asked about use of AI broadening and deepening and how we can help new hires gain an understanding. I think my answer also helps answer her question as well. When we talk about trustworthy AI, codes of data ethics, enterprise frameworks for governing the AI lifecycle, we're starting to see organizations, and SAS's own survey data, we have a data and AI survey coming out at the end of this month, as well as organizations like Hartford, PZU, they have publicly facing codes of AI ethics. Hartford, you can go on their website and you can find it, their principled approach to AI. PZU, largest insurer in Poland, we worked with them on their enterprise framework for governing the full life cycle of AI and ML models. And those aren't just documents for governing or publicly facing documents. Those are roadmaps for your employees, for them to make a determination when they are supposed to do something. Because when you pilot, you're not going to figure everything out, right? That's the point of a pilot. When you scale, your people are now your eyes and ears, right? So they are going to be the ones to have to address the questions that come up when that scale happens. So giving them the tools that they need to develop themselves and power their success is going to be that key to scalability. So I think that pilots are a great starting point, but if you're ignoring that people aspect of that journey, ultimately you're going to run afoul of this 95% of Gen AI pilots are failing MIT study that you've been sharing for us, Sabine.
Yeah. Denise, just to let you know, you have somebody, Tonsang, saying, you are highly impressive, so that you know that, Dennis. But I am going to also ask you that question about from Natalia around what new skill will be most valuable for people entering the workforce in an autonomous age.
I think the skill, there's I'm going to say two skills that are going to be really important. One is that you're going to have critical thinking and analytical skills. I don't care if you're developing the technology or you're using the technology. The AI embedded that is helping you do your job better is going to require you to also use your brain a lot more from an analytical perspective. So whether that's becoming a math major, it's a computer science major, whatever, you're going to have critical thinking and analytical skills. Coupled with that is communication skills. Because if we're going to rethink how we're going to do business and rethink the business process, you've got to be able to listen, you got to be able to communicate, you got to be able to kind of envision something. So I think that combination is going to be absolutely critical coming in for any type of job within the industry going forward. It's just not doing manual repetitive stuff that it's kind of boring. We got to start using our brains. And I think that's going to be the biggest, most important thing.
So I'm going to follow up with another question, which I will open to all of you, but I'm going to start with Dennis' viewpoint, and then I will hop across all of you to see whether you have anything else to add. The talent skill gap, Denise, will become more prevalent with AI systems, removing the entry-level repetitive work that entry-level workers would typically start with, right? So onboarding new talent will require extra work for the career and for anyone else, I think, as well. They won't find the ready-baked skill out there as soon as possible for entrance-level roles. So a double edge here. Would you agree or would you disagree? Starting with you, Dennis.
I actually disagree, because I think that you can have entry-level talent. You're just going to be able to get them scaled up much quicker. And the reason you're going to be able to do it is as an example, most of the systems that we have today, even if they're, nice UI, modern type of systems, it might have embedded documentation. How do you do an endorsement? How do you do a quote? How do you do this? And you either learn that through repetition, or you learn that by using, reading the documentation. Today, Gen AI can actually do that for you. You can say, tell me how to do an endorsement, and it'll give you the step-by-step kind of thing, and so that they can go and they can do it. I think it's actually going to scale people much quicker. And it's not about entry level. It's about being able to use the technology, leverage that technology. And I think the real value that's going to come out of this is that we're going to have a level of consistency and quality in processing across the business that we have not been able to have, because everybody kind of does it their own way, and it may not necessarily be consistent. And wow, think about the auditability of that and the transparency of that. Something that we've been trying to get as well. So I disagree. I actually think it's going to help allow new people to join, but scale much quicker and learn much faster.
Will, I'm going to go to you, Will, right? Looking at it from an underwriting viewpoint.
Yeah, no, I agree with Denise. I'll just give some anecdotes of how we're actually seeing this unfold across our customer base. First and foremost, you would assume with more and more aspects of the underwriting process being automated, that you would see each individual quote or submission have less time spent on it. We're actually seeing the opposite, which is really interesting, which is that Now, because some form of artificial intelligence is reviewing the entire submission portfolio, where an underwriter does dig in, they're digging in deeper, which means to say that an underwriter spends more time on fewer submissions. What that results in is more of a peer review process. Insurance underwriting is a peer review industry, right? A lot of deals go through a referral process, some sort of review, et cetera. Underwriters are getting deeper into that information. They're using tools that are available to them to query information. They're using tools to say what aspects of these underwriting guidelines apply. They're being proactively pushed that sort of information. They're putting together more comprehensive referral packages. They're having more enriched discussions with more experienced underwriters who are then approving or declining those referrals. And so it's very, very clear to us that the role is changing. It's also very clear to us that people are going to come up kind of the skill gap faster. And I think as we talk about the skill gap that others were referencing earlier, that's really how it's going to manifest. And so it's really all very interesting to develop. The key is to really pay attention to what's on the front lines and what's actually happening versus speculate, because a lot of this stuff is already playing out. That's how fast the stuff's being adopted.
Yeah, speed of change. Well, in time of velocity. What's your view, Sri, from a claims and litigation management viewpoint?
I think I'm still confused about whether or not, I agree with this or not. And the reason is because I see different levels of implementation of AI. And in some companies, they're still trying to figure out what is AI for them. And some companies have figured that out. For the companies that have figured that out, I would say you can actually transform and replace some of the mid-level management and some of the early entry level. For some companies that are still trying to figure out, I think they're still trying to figure out how to work with AI. And as long as you're still in that bucket of, I'm still trying to figure out if I get an insight, let's say Charlie tells me this is predicted for litigation, what am I going to do with it? How am I going to, like to Denise's point, like how am I going to build that analytical skill capability and the trust in my own decision that I'm actually going to reach out to this person, make a phone call, and actually mitigate this. I think there has to be a lot of, we as an industry, we're not there where we can just replace some of these jobs with AI insights and decision making, which is where I think, a lot of the workforce first need to be trained at the entry level. And when I say entry level, this is you are having to train them use of AI with their jobs. I think that's brand new, and I think that starts at the entry level and then it kind of moves forward. But I bet that the mid-level jobs are what are going to be more threatened.
Yeah. And you, Yandy, what's your view? Talent gap and the office of the CFO? You're on mute.
I have mixed feelings about this. I think it's a little bit of both, because you do have you already have a skill gap as it is in the financial office between the data component and the technical accounting component in finance. AI could definitely shorten the gap in the learning curve of the technical components of that. But I don't see that creating an issue really for onboarding. In fact, I think that can definitely help the personnel be brought up to speed much faster, because although the fundamentals and the principles are the same, the applications for each independent organization could be, AI could definitely help you onboard a customer to do, an employee to do that much faster. So I don't really see that creating a gap. However, I think there is going to be an ongoing growth on that gap overall for technical resources, because the entry-level resource that is supposed to learn from the more senior level position, that's likely going to continue to go away. It's already happening in tech, where you have junior developers not gaining that early younger experience, and now you have senior developers that are becoming much efficient in doing their work because they no longer need to spend a lot of time explaining junior developers, and now junior developers don't necessarily know, like, don't get that early experience. So I see a huge gap growing there, but from the office of the CFO, it's a slightly different play altogether.
Yeah. Franklin, coming back to you.
Yeah, so at every point in human history when there's been sort of major technological innovation, the entry point has moved upstream. And the story I use to remind myself of that fact is the root word of the saboteur. The root of that word comes from sabots, which is the wooden shoes that textile workers were throwing in looms when they thought the loom was going to take their job, right? Well, no one wears wooden shoes anymore, at least not predominantly. So I really do feel that the market is going to move upstream, right? And yes, is that going to create challenges for us as we're onboarding new talent? Well, sure. But I think maybe a different viewpoint I'd offer comes from Microsoft's annual Work Trends Index annual report. It's a survey of 31,000 professionals, global survey. And in that survey, 80% of people, individual contributors and leaders said they're lacking time and energy to do their work, right? So you don't want to do 100% AI because, we've seen those experiments fail in the marketplace. You don't want to do 0% AI because you're going to fall behind your competition. You need to do like 60%, 60, 70%, and then keep your current talent, which is also in the survey. Leaders are starting to think about, like, how do I keep my current level of employees and add a digital worker, right, to create that capacity. So the entry point for me moves upstream, right? The training onboarding looks a little bit different, but the payoff is giving people some room to breathe. I mean, all of us on this panel, as well as those of you following along at home, get emails outside of work hours or on meetings 6 or 7 hours out of your 8-hour day, working over the weekends, right? So those problems can start to be solved and addressed with your AI digital coworker, right? So I really encourage the group to start shifting their thinking around how we look at the talent gap and onboarding and really marrying this digital worker, this AI worker, with our current workforce.
Thank you, Franklin. During the holiday, but during August, early September, Dennis and I were on email and we were looking at some of the finances. We decided to look at financials. And given, so many InsurTech partners out there, right, Dennis, are struggling financially. And we've seen other non-small companies struggling too and getting some debt financing. How do you see the current transformation when you start looking at how you select your partners, going to happen as we envision our path to growth towards 2030? You're on mute, I think, Dennis.
I think the last few years we've seen a lot of change, as interest rates raised and we saw some failures. There's just been a lot going on in the market just financially. But I think that, there are many established insurtechs, and it's just not the new startups, that have been around for the last few years. It's those that might have been around for 10, 20, 30 years. And a number of them are struggling with profitability. And subsequently, what we see is that impacts their ability to actually do R&D investment in the product, especially now around AI. And so for our industry, knowing that many of these systems, are really sticky and they stay around for sometimes multiple decades. In fact, we just had a customer who just went off one that was 50 years old. This really requires us to think about these strategic partnerships and the advanced technology differently, because the pace of change is just so different today. So from our perspective, and in my conversations, Sabine, with you and others, I think when you invest and you partner with a company in the long, you got to look at the long term, because it's a mission critical relationship. Do you want to partner with somebody that can't handle the current debt that they might have? Whether it's VC investments, whether it's investment in the product, whether it's through M&A, whatever it is, they need to be able to manage that current debt, and they need to be able to make the cuts to be profitable. And if they have to make the cuts, are they going to continue to be financially viable? And are they going to be able to invest in customer support and R&D, especially around AI? I think today, what's interesting is that when you look at most of our solutions in the marketplace, I don't care if it's policy, it's billing, it's claims, it's underwriting, whatever those solutions might be. For the most part, we have functional parity. You might have a little bit greater feature here and a little bit better feature over there, et cetera. But what we don't have is parity in investments in the future, particularly around AI. And so I think we've got to start looking at strategic areas of consideration when you're picking out a partner over the longer term. And I think it's about technology partners who have a vision and a view of where that investment is going to be over the next 2 years. And that it's going to not just be, oh, we're going to do this little kind of cool kind of functionality thing, because will that even be necessary if you're using AI? If you're rethinking and reimagining the business, will you really need to do that? Because AI is going to allow you to do it completely different. And so I think, a partner that is financially viable, is committed to innovation, demonstrates R&D, and demonstrates, I think, innovation in that they're investing in the new technologies that are really critical is really important. But something I want to go back to also that I think, Ross, you said, or Will, you said, and that is that it can't just be technology for technology's sake. You've got to have the right kind of infrastructure and architecture that what you're building, you can kind of extrapolate across multiple things, so that if you're starting a pilot, you can extrapolate it across a lot of things. Too often we're just kind of doing point solutions all over the place, and we got to think bigger than that. So architecture and infrastructure does matter these days as well.
Absolutely. I mean, Sri, you have been doing this for a while, right? And you have worked with many carriers. The stat I was mentioning, 73% of InsurTech POCs never make it to production. What is your strategy to actually bring that corporate, right, on the journey from pilot to production, right, to avoid that valley of death, or actually to ensure that you can cross it with AI solution in the age of AI automation?
Okay, I will give my deep secrets here. The way we approach this is we started with identifying risks. Where do risks sit in the claims? And so we spent initial 3.5 years training our natural language processing models and coming up with our own language intelligence. We call that as a RAG. It's a graph RAG. What it really means is it is understanding every word you put in your claims, and it's picking the risk, which is completely anonymized, and it's taking that from all the different more than 60 million claims that we have been through, and that becomes our basis for everything that we did at Charlie. Oftentimes we see that, these POCs are very isolated. They're built in isolation. And that's one of the things that makes both parties unsuccessful, because one party is saying that you don't know anything. I'm bringing in new technologies. I don't like the way you're doing things, and that's why my technology will work. On the other side, they're saying, we know more than you. We want to see how you fail. We want to see how you don't understand this thing. And that doesn't even happen when you're looking at matchmaking platforms for marriage. So I really see this as a marriage. It's like you want to first look at what things match between the two parties. How did you even start this journey? And to Dennis's point, so our strategy always has been, it's risk, it's customer, it's risk. And risk is serviced by claims, brokered by the brokers, priced and underwritten by the underwriters, and priced it effectively by actuaries. So if it's the same risk that we're talking about, we need that as the knowledge base. And that's not going to change, because insurance business is risk business. And when you look at risk, you think about customers and you think about money. Of course, you think about how is that going to make you money, but did you understand that risk properly? And that's kind of the basis on which Charlie has been built, and we are expanding on that basis.
Thank you so much for this. I can see we have more questions, but I want to go back to a big issue or a big topic, which is so important for industry right now, which is trust, ethics, and the human AI balance. And I want to start with Will on this, because, you know, we are talking about AI and we are using AI in underwriting. And we just need to make sure when we use autonomous system that we're actually doing this responsibly. So where does human expertise remain irreplaceable, Will? And how do you decide what to automate?
Yeah. This gets right back to what I was speaking to earlier around the intersection of probabilistic systems and deterministic systems. I think one of the best safeguards that insurance companies have are that there are these ultimate kind of instantiators of what the policy is going to be, what the price is going to be, and what the terms are going to be, that I don't see moving off of a deterministic system framework at any point soon. And so it's really about putting systems of control then in place around this. Those systems of control can themselves be technology, by the way, right? If you're really trying to get towards portfolio and flow business, what you might say is, hey, there are certain thresholds that if we cross these, we may want to monitor those, et cetera. But equally important is to think about how that role of the underwriter is transforming, right? A great example is, yes, we can do some very complex things with automation. One of the ways to just take half a step back on the maturity curve is to say, what if we could do everything from the time an email hit the inbox through to having a rated quote prepared, but put an underwriter in a position where they're going through and systematically reviewing a model's thoughts of how did that model interact with the information and deterministic systems to get there. And so, I think it's all going to come back to sort of specification. It's all going to come back to systems of control. And then the truth is, a lot of interpretability of AI models and bias around AI models has more to do with building monitoring systems and, again, systems of control around those frameworks than it does with the models themselves, right? And so it's going to take discipline. It's going to take folks who are willing to make, to Denise's point earlier, the types of R&D investments it takes to go that extra level and beyond to cross that chasm.
Yeah, and I hear we need to make the right investment. We need not to rush too fast to actually get into probably those production projects to ensure that it's done right. You know, frankly, you and I have been talking about explainable AI, trustworthy AI, responsible AI, at least for the past 12 months, if it's not more. So when you look at what you do every day, frankly, what redundance system, or, where do you actually set those safeguards when you start using the human in the loop to make sure that we build a resilient system, regardless of where it is within the organization?
Yeah, and Will, I want to echo my support for your comments around the technology and the controls, use of model management and model risk management technologies to make sure that your guardrails are not being breached, that the models, when they're making decisions around settling a claim, underwriting a policy, et cetera, that they're not operating out of tolerance. The people that work for you, though, have to set those guardrails, right? They're the ones that have to determine, okay, I can say all I want that I have a principled approach to AI around human centricity, transparency, explainability, robustness, privacy, security, et cetera. But until I put in place the guardrail for average net claim payment in a claim event is this, and if it moves up or down the curve, I need an alert to tell me that my agent is being stubborn and not doing what I want it to do. Part of my role is storyteller. So if you all online have not read up on the OpenAI O3 Mini model refusing to shut down, to borrow a comment from our colleague at Forrester, Anjanil Bandyopadhyay, agents are stubborn and they will seek to achieve their goals, sometimes in the absence of direct commands. So having the human in the loop that is able to determine this is what those guardrails are is going to be critical for the operation of our business, to protect the brand of the organization to respond to regulators. And that does start with that principled approach. And especially when the system is going to become overwhelmed. So mark my words, a catastrophe is going to come through. You're going to have 10, 100,000x claims coming through, and you're going to deploy your agent team, right? And those agents are going to attempt to make decisions relative to their commands and instructions. And when they start subverting those guardrails, you need somebody with eyes on, a supervisor or agent, someone who understands the technology to be able to say, this isn't working. We need to press pause on this, right? And revisit how this system is working, because right now it is not working as designed. So without that principled approach, without those people with the eyes on it, you're going to send too many claims down a fraud investigation path. You're going to settle claims at too high a value. You're going to not deny 300,000 claims in mere seconds, because that's what the machine has been programmed and taught to do.
So Yandy, listening to all this, right? We went into the people, conversation, talent. We talked just now around making sure we have the right safeguards, right? We have the right team, human in the loop. But then we're also talking about technology. And, you know, when you start looking at that CFO, you know, when you look at customer acquisition costs for B2B insurtechs, for example, right? Those numbers tend to be very high for SaaS companies. So how do we start justifying the unit economic cost of our solution, scaling our solution to the finance office? Don't forget to unmute.
Yes. Yeah, being an insurtech in this landscape, it's quite challenging. I mean, there's a well-known sales cycle of 12 to 18 months, and that only amplifies the customer acquisition cost for all of us. But really, you know, the story is, from my perspective, it's not really about the cost itself. I think it's really centered around the value creation. Like, what is it that we're doing, and how are we actually driving impact from the perspective of the CFO? At the end of the day, dollars is really what matters. Are we doing something that is going to be, you know, make an impact or not? And if you are, eventually, that cost doesn't really it's irrelevant from the lens of the CFO, as long as, again, keenly focus on value creation. Insurers typically they don't just adopt tools casually. I mean, it's not like a standard SaaS model where you have a pricing page, you buy and self-service pretty much, right? That doesn't really happen when an insurer decides to go and buy an enterprise level product. It's typically going to be a product that's going to be adopted throughout the organization, and that has its own adoption curve, really. And you know, the companies that really tend to succeed and make it past the pilot are those that showed and proved to the carrier that their solution is really going to make an impact. It's going to really move the needle. It's not, insurers are not looking for another shiny object to say, hey, I bought this. That's irrelevant in this space, really. It's all about which solution is coming to the table, like bringing the most valuable set of tools and really driving a massive impact that is going to really affect either loss ratio, expense ratio, combined ratio, and even further, I mean, operating ratio is even more important because that gives you the full picture.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you so much, Yandy. Denise, I'm going to come back to you. We have probably 5 minutes before the end of this discussion. So I'm going to ask you a question, and I can see there's still engagement on the comments. So we'll go and actually answer everybody if we cannot ask all your questions. But remember, you can meet Denise, Franklin, Sri, Yandy, and Will at ITC Vegas just in a few weeks. Gosh, it's just coming so fast. And they would love to actually talk to you directly and answer all your questions. Denise, how do we balance, right, commercial goals with fairness and transparency, especially when technology partners may be forced to cut R&D? You mentioned that, you know, finances is not that good for everybody at the moment, and we need to invest in artificial intelligence. So how do we balance this with our commercial goals?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. First, the development of any AI model really needs to include assessing the fairness and transparency as part of that process. And if you don't have the resources, beyond just the development of the model to test it and validate it, you shouldn't be doing it to begin with, quite frankly. But secondly, I think this came up on a panel that I did at InsurTech Insights in June. And I think the really unique thing is that we were talking about changing the business process and the use of the Gen AI and agentic AI in that process. And the question came up is auditability, which we know is given a highly regulated industry, auditability is really important. And it really was pushed back from the standpoint that because you've developed a model, you can actually track everything that was done with it, and even the people who have supervisory authority over accepting whatever the model comes up with. We probably have more auditability using Gen AI and AI than we've ever had in our systems before, because it was people, and nothing, not everything was easily tracked and auditable. But with these technologies, it does become that. And so I think what really happens is that people can actually do their work and their transactions, and it's traceable, it's auditable, and it provides a different level of quality and consistency, which ultimately improves loyalty and it improves trust. And I think that's what we're all trying to get to.
Absolutely. So I'm going to ask you all my last question. And it's probably going to be a combination of questions I saw on the feed and the question I wanted to ask you all. If you could eliminate one part of the insurance value, what could that be? Or another way to ask that question is, what is the major improvement do you think insurance carriers need to do to be ready for the transformation, the digital transformation we are going through with artificial intelligence? So I'm going to start with you, Will.
Yeah, no, I think probably the layer that will come under the most attack as we continue to see a digitization of systems, a shift to more automated systems, a set of systems that create more logging and provenance and tracing capability, is actually the capacity in reinsurance markets. A huge percentage of premium paid today is effectively covering the inefficiency of the underwrite, and then the retransacting of that risk on the back end, whether that be an MGA securing its capacity or that MGA or a carrier securing some form of reinsurance all the way up through retrocession, ILS, et cetera. And there are markets in the US and around the world today in which tens of cents on the dollar, right? So we're talking 20, 30, 40 cents of a dollar of premium are not being spent to insure a risk, but rather are being spent to then repackage that risk into these subsequent levels. And I think as we see increased digitization at the primary point of underwriting, that's going to come under attack. I do not think reinsurance brokers will go kaput anytime soon, but I do think margins are going to compress there. We're going to see a much more digital experience in that part of the stack. And you're seeing this already with some really amazing companies playing in this sector, but I just think that this will all feed through the technology.
Yeah, wonderful. Denise, you are smiling. What's your view?
Yeah, I love what he said. It brought back a lot of memories, but I'm going to go a little bit more simple with that. I'm going to say portals. We will no longer need them, as AI would be able to gather that and gather it in a different way. And I think that it's going to be gathering it by voice, rather than having to key things in. And it's going to be a different engagement process. Once again, rethink and reimagine the process. I think portals are gone.
Yeah. I spend a lot of time on my voice, AI. So anyhow, Yandy, what's your view?
I wish there was more connectivity across every system in the entire value chain. And in the entire value chain, every single system. I mean, the fact that submissions take forever, that's a byproduct created by design. It is because carriers don't want that data to go out easily. But if we made it easier for all of these processes to take place, you win more trust with your customer because you gain transparency and you show them that you have nothing to hide. And two, you make the entire process. There are industries being created alone just because of the bottlenecks in the submission process for brokers and underwriters, between brokers and underwriters. And that alone is completely necessary. The data is there. The data is in a database in somewhere. It's just the connectivity is not in place. The transparency is not 100% in place. So if we could do away with one thing, for me would be exactly that. Just making sure that things are more connected.
Yeah, well said. Sri.
I'm going to be bold and say we want to remove all these claims underwriting talks and have one well-orchestrated AI risk data that's flowing through all the departments, because that is really what the insurance value chain is all about. And we all need to be working off that same knowledge base.
Thank you, Sri. And Franklin.
Well, I'm going to borrow something Sri said a little bit earlier. Indemnity is dead. Long live, predict, and prevent. Like the current state of AI and machine learning is giving us capabilities to get ahead of the curve, build resilient communities, model out events so that we can add a different value proposition to consumers and businesses that didn't exist before.
So I want to thank you all, right? I want to thank all our panelists today for turning into this discussion, tuning in, and all of you as well for participating. I know you will be able to have access to this discussion a long time after we are done today. But if there was one takeaway I would like to highlight is the future of insurance won't wait for 2030. I just heard it last week. You know, some of the change we are actually talking about are going to be happening within the next 2 years. The winners won't just be those with the best algorithm or the deepest pocket, but those who align ethics with execution and innovation with resilience, and also understand how to orchestrate all the bolts seamlessly. And I think we see some of those already within the smaller organization and in the embedded insurance world, actually. Whether you are leading a global insurance company, building a scale up, or backing the next unicorn, the challenge is the same. Turn pilots into production, responsibly develop your technology to drive trust and disruption into sustainable growth. So thank you very much for joining us today. I look forward to seeing you at ITC Vegas, all of you. I cannot wait. So good night or good afternoon for some of you, et à bientôt.